everybody, to another episode of Doomloop Dispatch, the podcast that covers the voice of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm your host, D. Scott Miller, and my co-host, whenever possible, is
Kevin L. Jones.
And today we have a very special guest. We were just talking about this. He's an Oakland legend in so many different ways. One of the first journalists to really cover the Bay Area hip hop scene. Also very much active in a lot of our political events, particularly things around Oscar Grant, things around Occupy Oakland. Very much involved in the creation of our cultural zone in downtown Oakland. Eric K. Arnold. And if you don't know his name, you need to learn it. And thanks for taking the time, man, to talk to us.
Yeah, happy to be here, man.
The first thing I want to do is I've known you for over 20 years now. We worked together at the East Bay Express.
We did. And we got the scars to prove it.
Hell yeah, brother. But your origin story, if you will, is a very interesting one to me. So could you just give a breakdown on how you got to the East Bay Express and how you got involved in chronicling our Oakland culture?
Well, it all started with the Big Bang. No, I grew up in Berkeley, and I went to Cazadero Music Camp, and that was just like this hub for what would become the East Bay music scene. Whoopi Goldberg was a program director one year. DJ Fuse was up there before he was DJ Fuse. He was actually my neighbor from down the street.
Shouts to Fuse.
The Professionals, Jay Lane, the Uptones, Dave and Zoe Ellis, Erasmus Kennedy. It was like Andy Norell. It was just like a who's who of Bay Area music talent goodness. And I was a camper there, but then I got a summer job through the summer job program in Berkeley, working at the camp, which meant that I had to be there for every session. So instead of 2 weeks, I would spend like 2.5 months there. And I'd be there for every session. And they would have jazz camp, and I got to meet like Eddie Marshall and his family. Ed Kelly was up there, Dave Creamer, who played with Miles Davis. It was just like this amazing introduction to all types of music, because you'd walk from one end of the camp to the other, and you might hear 10 different bands practicing 10 different songs in 10 different genres.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Awesome.
And right around that time is when hip hop started to be popular. So I remember I think it was like either 82 or 83, a breaking crew came through, and they were like the night's entertainment. And different people had DJ Fuse, Dave Elliott. He had the first Techniques 1200s I had ever seen, and he brought like a couple hundred records with him. And this was all the stuff that was just out at the time. I'm talking like 83, 84. There's maybe only 20 hip hop records that you can even buy.
Yep, I remember that. Yep.
So I remember listening to Planet Rock and listening to the World Class Wrecking Crew with Dr. Dre.
Yep.
Turntable mixers, like the Surgery, right? DJ Fuse had Placing the Beat, Spider D, Egyptian Lover.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, that's when like Egyptian Lover came out.
Yeah.
And so at that time, like hip hop was like a cult. Because even within the camp, there were people that were like totally into like new wave. So they'd be like, Thompson Twins and Thomas Dolby. And then there were other people that were into like Huey Lewis, because he was big at that time, the Sports album, and Michael Jackson. That was when Off the Wall was his big album. And then you had like the more esoteric people that would listen to like Weather Report and Herbie Hancock. But hip hop, it slowly grew and became like more and more and more and more of a thing. And I just started like collecting records. We had really good record stores in Berkeley. We had Amoeba, Rasputin. Actually, this was before Amoeba. We had Rasputin, Tower.
Yeah. Tower was
Uh,
the go-to. Tower was always the go-to. That's they always had that vinyl for you.
I mean, they
Yeah.
had they had a whole like floor of like cutout vinyl, which
Yeah.
was like returned. So I mean, that's where I got Funkadelic One Nation Under a Groove for like, I don't know, like a few dollars, like
Hmm.
sealed copy with the 7-inch with
Yep.
Maggot Brain on
Yep.
there.
That's right.
Alive,
You
right?
know, uh, so yeah, I had like really good like record stores. So I started like building up a collection, and then I went to UC Santa Cruz
Hmm.
for college, and I started DJing at the radio station out there. And I actually had the first hip hop show in Santa Cruz,
Oh,
Wow.
word.
like before Cutmaster Kurt or anybody. In fact, Kurt, we were friends back then. He used to come by my show a little bit, and I, was playing all this hip hop. This was a time when it was like the Afrocentric age of hip hop, right? So you had Public Enemy, Eric B. and Rakim,
Yeah.
Native Tongues a little bit later on,
Yep.
but just this whole like cultural wave. It wasn't even so much the groups with the defined political ideology.
Hmm.
It was just that it was a cultural movement, and that you could express your identity just through the way you dressed,
Hmm. That's facts.
which was different from what had gone before. I mean, even like the R&B people, like with the Jerry curls and stuff, we weren't doing that. I mean, we were not into like the Gap Band and Rick James and stuff like that. That was like the past as far as we were concerned,
Mhm.
So yeah, I did that show for a few years, and I started writing actually for the school paper, City on a Hill. I remember I interviewed EPMD and Buche Emecheta, the
Wow.
author of
Wow.
Joys of Motherhood. That was my first cover story ever published.
Awesome.
And then after I got out of college, my friend that I had actually grew up with called me up one day and was like, "Hey, I'm starting a hip hop magazine, and we're moving to Berkeley. Would you be the editor?" And that's how I became the editor of 4080. Now, at the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
4080 was like a Xerox thing.
Yes, it
Like
was.
we would actually put it together at CopyMat
Yep.
Awesome.
or Kinko's,
Now, I used
right?
to go. I used to be a place on a Lower Haight called a Naked Eye, and I used to go there just looking for that, That was the first place I saw your name, and also the
Yeah,
first place I saw Malcolm Shabazz Hoover's name too. Was that?
yeah, that was a
Yeah.
little bit later, but anyway, so we grew like really rapidly, and before long we were glossy,
Yeah.
and then not full color, but we had color pages, and then people really started embracing it, and we started to get all these ads from like uh I would say independent mob music makers, because that's really what the Bay Area was,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I'm someone that, I did my thesis on hip hop, I connected it back to the oral tradition, now all of a sudden I'm being asked to review Mac Lou.
Yeah.
But I mean, aesthetic considerations aside, I learned how to embrace it because that was a time of real growth and expansion in the Bay Area, in
Right.
Bay Area hip hop. And I mean, that was when E40 was just coming up. Digital Underground had already blown up. Souls of Mischief had already blown up. But, if we're talking like 93, 94, 95,
Yeah.
that's like the golden era of Bay Area hip hop.
Hmm.
Mhm.
That's
You know,
facts.
that's like,
Hobo Junction's in that
Oh
mix?
yeah. New
yeah, Hobo
Riders.
Junction.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
I mean, I was at the battle with Saphir and Casual at
Oh,
Cameo. Actually, I was at the first one at the Kennel Club too.
Oh man, you bring up the Kennel Club, but that is one of the most historic rap battles in the history of rap battles. Is Hobo
oh
Junction
totally.
versus Hyro, and you were in the room. You were there.
Yeah, yeah, no, I was there. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow,
No,
bro.
we
I
got
didn't
to
know that about
invite.
you.
I mean, it was, I didn't know how impactful it would be at the time. I
Mhm.
mean, who could have? But that's the thing that, that took it worldwide. That made the Wake Up Show. That's how the Wake Up Show got syndicated nationally.
That's
After
right.
that, they were able to do whatever they wanted at KMEL.
Yep.
I mean, it was just really an amazing time. And 4080 was blowing up. By that time, we had like circulation about 100,000.
Nice.
And we were
Wow.
national. We were on newsstands. And
Oh,
in terms of the hip hop magazines, there were about 40 hip hop magazines nationwide at that time. And we were probably like number 4 or number 5. And we were the only one in that kind of lofty position that was independent. Everyone else was corporate. I mean, The Source, Rap Pages, XXL,
Yep.
Rap Sheet, these were all like corporate entities.
Yep.
But we weren't.
And
You know, for bet.
sponsored from the East Coast too. I mean, like there was,
yeah.
it was so hard to find. It was so hard to find hip hop coverage on the West Coast. I mean,
Well, Rap Pages and Rap Sheet were from LA.
Oh, I didn't know that. They just covered New York like that was the center of the world.
I mean, no, they did a lot of LA artists, but I mean, at that time, you know, it was, you know, there was a whole lot of New York influence. I mean, a lot of that was, you know, due to The Source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Source Magazine, and then Vibe and XXL came after it.
Mhm.
But yeah, and, you know, getting back to the 4080 story. So it's just this incredible time of like growth and just ballerhood in the Bay Area hip hop. I mean, that's when the Loonies came out. You know, Spice One had like 3 consecutive platinum albums.
Yeah.
And you know, there was also like a very big, you know, you had sort of like your turf rap or your thug rap, but then you also had a very sort of backpacky alternative scene that you know, sort of followed in the footsteps of Hyro.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, people like Mystic Journeyman
I
and,
was just
and
ready to
Living
say that.
Legends.
That's right.
Yeah. And so, you know, the Bay Area is able to support all of these things at the same time.
Mhm.
It wasn't something that could just be pinned down like, you only sound like this. You know,
Right.
we had a lot of diversity within us. The Coup. I mean, a lot of people in Bay Area hip hop, we gave them their first magazine cover. I mean, we had
Oh,
the
wow.
first Coup cover, the first Saphir cover.
Rest in
I don't
peace.
I don't know if the first Master P cover, the first E40 cover, the first
Wow.
Paris cover, the first Conscious Daughters cover.
Mm.
I mean, we did a lot, you know, and we almost, I mean, we covered a little bit of East Coast hip hop because we had to. I mean, you know, that's the ads that we were getting were from East Coast labels, right? So I think, you know, I remember we did Nas in 1996 as a cover, and I actually did that interview in San Francisco before the show that night at the Kennel Club.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it might have been the Justice League by then, but
Yeah, you know, I have to do that too. I think the way I date my memories is it was it the Kennel Club? Was it the Independent?
was it the Justice League? What
Was it
about the
Justice League?
Crash?
Oh, Crash Palace.
What the Crash Palace? I mean, me and my partner Alex did a show with Pete Rock there and just lost our shirts. Well, he lost his shirt. I didn't actually put any money up, but
That's like,
but he was all hyped on Pete Rock, and like Pete Rock had no draw outside of the East Coast at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, anyway, getting to the East Bay Express. So then Tupac got shot.
Hmm.
And you know, that was a big issue. The coastal beef, quote unquote, which is really fomented by Vibe magazine
Yep. Kevin
and the
Powell in
source
particular. Yep.
and the source a little bit.
Mhm.
You know, that became something where it seemed like it was dangerous, but for me, I didn't really want to have like a coastal beef. I was like, I like Wu Tang, I like Boot Camp Click. You know, I'm feeling this Poor Righteous Teachers album.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Why can't we
Smith
have
and
it all?
Wesson.
Yeah. We should have it all. Should be able to have it all. That's right.
Why do I have to choose? You know, but
Mhm.
anyway, that jumped off, and I ended up doing like an 8,000 word piece on Tupac, where I talked to Layla Steinberg. At that time, that was before Vibe had even talked to her. After my article came out, they went back and they re-interviewed her because they realized they left something on the table. And then not long after that, I left 4080. I just had to grow. Probably about 6 months after that, I got a call from my homegirl, Tracy McGregor, who was an editor at the Source, you know, and I had taken Swahili with her back in Santa Cruz.
Hmm.
And you know, we had like co-hosted a radio show, like a reggae show, Caribbean Vibrations. And she was having problems with like some writer who was like doing a column, and she was like, yo, can I put you on this assignment? And I was like, what's the assignment? So that ended up being the In the Hood column. And I did that, I think, for like 3.5 years, where the source would actually send me to like a different region, a different city every month. And I would report on their regional hip hop scene.
Oh, cool. What was the most surprising scene you checked out?
Most surprising.
Like the one where you're like, there's got to be nothing here. And you're like, whoa, this is amazing.
I mean, I discovered Nelly recording in a roller rink in St. Louis.
Oh,
You know, yeah, and that was the first ink that Nelly ever got. I discovered A-Track up in Montreal.
Oh, wow.
You know, I went down to Fresno and quote unquote discovered Planet Asia.
I booked a show for him. Another one of those saying sort of surprising lack of draw in Oakland. But
well, I mean, but
I love that guy.
But he really he's validated my faith in him. He actually used to work at Amoeba, which is how I got to know him. And then I heard his EP, and I was like, this guy has what it takes.
Dude, that first EP is so good, so solid.
Yeah, with the Fanatic beats. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I, went down to Fresno, and it was a whole thing with him and the Schoolyard crew. And, he's managed to make this independent living out of hip hop. There's so many people that were signed to like major label contracts that are no longer even in the game anymore.
Yep.
And Planet Asia just keeps getting stronger. I mean, he's doing all these shows locally, he's done international shows, he's gotten to be on a few like national tours. I mean, he's really in control of his own destiny.
That's what's up.
But yeah, I knew he had it in him, back in like 98. So yeah, I did In the Hood for a little bit. For a few years, like 3.5 years. I went out to like Shreveport and Milwaukee. I still remember Baby Drew, who was this artist from Milwaukee that had a local tape that didn't get heard outside of the region, but it was like maybe the equivalent of a Mac Dre.
Okay.
For us.
Wow.
And in that it was really good. It had really good production values, but it was all about that regional local aesthetic.
Right.
And the album was actually called Powder, Powder. And they sort of recreated the Ice-T Power cover.
Okay.
But it was Powder. So you can kind of draw your own associations from that. But anyway, it was like a dope album. I mean, I would go out every month and I'd come back with like a stack of like 10 to 15 CDs, vinyl, t-shirts. I went to Houston and hung out with like South Park Mexican at a Lil Kiki show.
Was DJ Screw still going too?
We tried to meet Screw like on 3 different days, and we went by his shop, and he was like so messed up on lean that he didn't even come into his own shop.
Oh man.
So I wasn't able to really interview him, but I still have like a couple of his Screwed Mix CDs, which are now classic.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so then I I met this girl and we moved in together, and I was like, okay, I got to get my shit together. I got to get a real job. So then I saw that the Express was hiring for, I think it was calendar editor or clubs and concert editor, something like that. And that's how I started at the Express, which is, I think, like 2002, 2003. I mean, I had written for the Express before, like as a freelancer, going back to like 1994.
Yeah.
But this was like me coming on staff, and I went on staff, and it was like the paper had just gotten sold. It wasn't the same paper that I knew from when they were on Gilman Street, not Gilman, on Ashby in Berkeley, next to Holders Access. They got sold to New Times, which was a chain of alt weeklies. They were based in like, I think, Denver and Phoenix, like somewhere between there.
Yeah, it was Denver. It was Denver. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and they owned all these papers, and they also own like an advertising agency. And so what they would do would be they would create a template. They try to create a cookie cutter template across all of their papers, because then that made it easier for advertisers to make ad buys in every different market. And the thing is, when you set up your business like that, and it's a media business, it does impact editorial.
It does.
Yep.
So anyway, that's my origin story, how I got to the East Bay Express.
Wow, love it, man.
Yeah.
What a history. You got to see it all.
Yeah, he did. And here's the thing: it's like, I have to credit Eric Arnold for being the person who inspired the Afro-Surreal arts movement.
Oh, awesome.
And the reason I have to credit him for that is because he is one of the architects of the hyphy movement with E40. Yes, you are. And don't you deny it. Don't you deny it.
No, I'm not an architect.
There were two things we used to argue about all the time. The first one was, is the Digable Planets album gangster rap? Is Blowout Comb gangster rap? I've always continued that it was, and Eric has always said you're out of your mind. And the other one is that, like, how do you compose a movement? And the reason why I actually do have to credit him for it is because we used to talk about what makes a movement, like, all the time. So, okay, so can you talk a little bit about how you are involved with E40's hyphy movement? It did end up becoming an international sensation. So,
well, I mean, even giving E40 the credit for it is a little bit misleading, because that was all a marketing scheme by Warner Brothers that came in well after hyphy had been established.
Right.
And they bought, a hyphymovement.com. They signed the federation. But here's the thing. Hyphy had, 40, 50, 60 artists from all over the Bay. And your major record label, has 2 artists on it. So that means you can't really do a tour. You can't really coordinate promotions. Why would Warner Brothers want to promote Mr. Fab?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't make any money from it.
Yep.
And so what they were doing was they were kind of rebranding E40, who was an artist that, had first come out in the early 90s, actually even before that.
Yeah.
If we go back to like the Kingsmen and, early Click, who we had promoted with, in 1994 with, in a major way at 4080. And Warner Brothers said, we're going to rebrand this guy. What's happening in the Bay Area? And so the hyphy movement was really something that began to jump off around 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
And I mean, actually, I'm famous for not getting along with this guy, but you could actually give Big Von some of the credit for that.
Huh. Well, that's because he's coming from corporate America. He's KML, right? Big Von's KML.
So Big Von was like the music director. He may have been the assistant music director at that time at KML. But he was also DJing at the On Broadway and Mingles in Oakland. And so what he would do is he'd get these, he would get sent all these promos, and he would test his promos out at the club to see if they had any chance of getting radio play.
Genius.
And that's how Keek the Sneaks, jeans, white t-shirts, and Nikes became a hit. Is because Vaughn saw the response that had at the club, and he started playing it on KMEL.
Yeah.
Which is like a whole nother story. Maybe we'll go into that in a later podcast. But so that was happening. I mean, a lot of people say that the first hyphy track in terms of production was "Gasoline" by E40 off the Breaking News album. I feel like hyphy was something that accumulated. Like it definitely, its roots are in the mob music era. And people like 415 and 3 Times Crazy, which is where Keek the Sneak comes from.
Yep.
That kind of set a foundation for Bay Area rap, and then it kept evolving. And then after Atlanta had come out with Crunk, people started saying, well, why can't we do that in the Bay Area? Let's really make a club sound. So it was partially like the Bay Area emulating Atlanta, but with Bay Area slang that was still regional and in some cases city and neighborhood specific.
Yep.
And then on top of that, they added sort of like this really dysfunctional culture of these kids that grew up in the crack era, meaning their parents were either crack users or crack dealers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they didn't have the highest level of education, and they did a lot of self-medication, and they self-medicated by quote unquote going dumb,
Yeah. Hmm.
which was, you shake your dreads and you act like in a very um, sort of vibrant manner, you know,
Yeah.
which, I mean, I could actually trace, something like that going all the way back to Africa, but we don't really have time to get into the etymology of it. But it was like this whole movement where like people would have like day glow hoodies, and there was all this sort of psychedelic influence that came from Mac Dre when he became Fizell Washington.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he
His
became
face.
Fizell Washington because he used to go to these raves at home base down in San Leandro. And that's where he got introduced to like ecstasy.
Yep.
And then that influence started coming into the music, which was a change from what it had been before.
Mhm.
And yeah, I remember writing a piece for Accelerator in, I think, either late 2003, early 2004, that said hyphy. And it got a mention on the cover. So that actually makes me the first journalist to write about hyphy.
Oh wow.
See, I told
Even
you
though-
about this guy. I told you about this guy.
That's crazy, man. That's
Even though the
insane.
former editor of the East Bay Express mistakenly gave that credit to his own white protege, but that wasn't even true at all.
That's
Like
messed up.
I got receipts on that. So
But
yeah,
then why does Peak to Sneak say it's my word? That's my
because
word.
it was his word, because hyphy existed as a word before it became a movement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, that's the thing. Like the thing I find really interesting about what Eric was really involved in, he was on the ground floor of this thing that just I thought it was organic. I'm learning just now that it wasn't. Like it was not organic. It was actually a way to separate labels from
Yep.
each other, right? But
It was organic,
but it was
but the-
organic too.
but the marketing of it, I mean, you only had a couple major labels that came in, and they did the same thing with punk. They did the same thing with new wave.
True.
They're not going to let independent labels come in and take over their entire turf. They did the same thing in '94 when Bay Area artists were selling like 200 and 300,000 copies independently.
Yep.
They all got signed.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because it's a threat.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Hammer held out more than anybody else. I think that Hammer was given a massive deal, and he's like, "No, I'm making more than that on the streets. I don't need that. I don't need that."
I mean, Hammer did sign to Capitol, though.
Yeah, eventually he did, of course. Yeah. Okay, but let's move on to something else. I mean, okay, the Black Cultural Zone. What is that called again? Downtown
That's the Black Arts
Business District.
Business District.
The
Yeah.
Black Arts Business.
Black Arts Movement.
The
Business
Black Arts
District.
Movement Business District.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why they had to
Good.
put in business district. It kind of messes up the flow there, but
Yeah. Can you explain it? Because I mean, it's still around, right? It's still like it's still
yeah,
down
and
there.
it's still waiting for city funding.
Oh, really? What year did that get approved?
2016.
Okay, so was that under Jing Quan or Libby Schaff?
I think Libby was the mayor at that time.
Okay. So, I mean,
Yeah.
so can you, because I mean, the thing I like, you are a culture worker, but oftentimes that culture actually spills into things like politics, spills
Sure.
into just into like things into activism. So you've
Sure.
always kind of like been like kind of at the crux of cultural movement and political movement and activism. You've always kind of like sat at that crux. Can you kind of explain how you've been able to navigate those worlds?
Well, I don't think it was, I mean, at least at first, it wasn't like intentional. It was just sort of like, this is what was happening. I mean, I had some experiences with corporate America that weren't really all that great, as one might imagine, and that sort of like leaves you with a bitter taste in your mouth. And you, and you say, well, I want to do something that's more grassroots. It's kind of like more for the community, not knowing at the time that politics invades every single area of the world, and you can't ever escape politics, but you think you're doing something for the right reason.
Right.
So, I mean, I think the Bay Area is also the Bay Area hip hop is also, it's very grassroots, meaning community centric. And it's always had a lot of political activism because basically the legacy of the Black Panthers, the free
Hmm.
speech movement, all the, things that went on here in the 60s and 70s. That was like my parents, that was like Boots's parents, that was like Money B's parents, that was like Latif the Truth Speaker's parents.
Yeah.
you know um and even if your parents weren't directly involved in like some sort of like liberation movement that was in the community. I mean, you might have gone to defremery and gotten you know uh a sickle cell checkup or a free breakfast down at the community learning center, in like 1975,
Right.
or taking a martial arts class or something like that. So that's always been part of like the Bay Area aesthetic. We've always had sort of like this political and cultural awareness that were fused together. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was one of the main aesthetics of the Black Arts movement,
Hmm.
which I believe it started in 1965. And it started in New York, but it came out here almost immediately.
Right.
And so some people have described it as the cultural arm of the Black Panther movement, which isn't entirely correct, but it's like close enough.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I always kind of had that like mentality behind me, and I don't know like exactly how it all came about, but I was asked to be on a working group that Lynette McElhaney, who was then the council member for District 3 in West Oakland downtown, was putting together. And that ended up being the Black Culture Keepers group. And we met a few times in 2015 with the idea of creating a Black Arts District. And Lynette wanted to just celebrate Black business downtown, and basically, give a shout out to Jeffrey Pete and Joyce Gordon,
Hmm.
who, had basically maintained this one block in Oakland and, like leased it to other Black businesses. I think Jeffrey owns like that whole building, and then he leased it to Joyce, and then there were a couple other Black businesses there. And, but Marvin X, who's the co-founder of the Black Arts Movement, and Paul Cobb, who's the publisher of the Oakland Post, had for years tried to get a some sort of recognition of the Black Arts Movement. So those two ideas kind of merged, and that's how it became the Black Arts Movement Business District. And so the city came out with a resolution officially proclaiming it. I think it was in early 2016. I want to say January. Um, and we all took a photo that ended up being on the cover of the Post. And then we waited for the next steps, which were okay. In the proclamation it says, the city's going to look for funds from all its departments to sort of like build up this, recognize the cultural contributions of African Americans, and also make up for historical inequity. And we waited and waited and waited and waited, and Lynette never asked for a dime of funding.
Oh,
She never asked.
No. Apparently, she got into it with Marvin X over banners. Like she had been dragging her feet, and Marvin X was like, "Where are the banners? We need banners, Lynette." And I don't know how Marvin came at Lynette, but she was shook.
Mm.
Like the proverbial, uh, you know, uh, victim of Mob Deep, and she just walked away from this whole district that she was actually the acting council person from.
oh, Jesus.
Like never made a single request for any type of city funding. Kind of made a half-assed attempt to get cultural district certification from the California Arts Council. But when they gave her feedback, like, no, we need cultural districts to be bottom up, not top down. I mean, they sent her very detailed feedback, like, you can't micromanage a cultural district as an elected official. It's
Wow.
ethically and morally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Of course, it's always personal too.
Yeah, so it's been dead in motion this whole time, essentially. Like
Well,
you got the proclamation, but there's no support for it.
I mean, there hasn't been any city support. I think Carol Fife may have tried to do some things.
Yeah.
But then we get into like the pandemic and then the budget deficit. And Carol Fife is the current council person for District 3. And and now all of a sudden the city has no money and actually has to cut its entire cultural affairs department. But to tell you the truth, D, I don't even feel that bad about it after learning that San Francisco just cut 30 million for the arts.
Oh, wow.
Yes, they did.
So I can't even feel too bad about Oakland losing 1.2 million from its cultural affairs district because we had low expectations from the city.
Yeah.
But if you're like the African American Theater Company or African American Shakespeare Company and you're celebrating your 30th anniversary and you're expecting that 300K from the city that was already granted, and now all of a sudden you get an email saying it's rescinded.
Oof. Well, I'm actually thinking yeah, go ahead.
That's like being returned to slavery.
Well, it's so crazy because you got me thinking about my former employer, Center for African American Art and Culture, over there on Fulton. Like London Breed was very much involved with that program. She's my former boss from there. She was the executive director when I was a teacher tutor over there.
Yeah,
they're going to suffer. They're going to suffer. I didn't know about that. That's bad. That's bad.
I just read that today. I mean, I was like, what? They're cutting 30 million? And it looks like it's over some bullshit too. Like there are some questions about transparency and accountability, but that is an internal issue with the staff. That has nothing to do with the arts organizations that are applying for these grants. It's just another way that I feel like it's these tech bros going in on DEI.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. That's exactly
what it felt like to me. Yeah.
And that is like, I mean, there was a time when you were working with Desi, right? Like, what's his full name?
Desimundo. Yeah,
Desimundo. For like, you guys were really involved with putting up murals all over the city at one point. Was that being supported by the city, or was that something you guys were just doing as a nonprofit or something like that?
We got a smidgen from the city. I mean, it's funny because I actually, I remember like going to like a council meeting, and we were talking about public art, and we were talking about like abatement, and the city spends like $1 million on abatement, and they never get rid of any of the graffiti. It's something where it's a zero-sum game. And so I remember advocating like, well, why doesn't the city put up some money like for murals in each district? And I think Rebecca Kaplan, I think that she liked the idea. She created like a mural fund for each district in Oakland that I think totaled something like $400,000.
Okay.
But in terms of CRP, we probably only got maybe like $10,000 out of that. I mean, East Side Arts Alliance ended up getting, a lot of funding from that program that we created, and they had nothing to do with even securing that money.
Yeah, so CRP stands for Community Restoration Project, right?
Rejuvenation, yeah.
Community Rejuvenation Project. And what's so funny to me is like a lot of people don't understand this, but when you put a mural up, taggers don't mess with it. Yeah, taggers don't mess with murals. So the more murals you have, the less tags you're going to see. But also, I'm not mad at tagging because
can I build on that point, D?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so what you just said, like taggers don't mess with murals. So are you guys familiar with 14th and Alice, that intersection, that corner right there?
I used to live there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so there's a child development center, like a preschool called
Yeah.
Starlight,
Hmm.
and the facade of their building used to get bombed. Like it got bombed and bombed and bombed and bombed. I mean, they would like repaint that like every month.
Yeah.
And finally, they hired Buku One to do an alphabet mural. So it's a mural of the alphabet in like crazy wild style, classic wild style. Like I'm talking like T Kid 170 scene, Dondi, like
Yeah,
that
Dundee shit.
level,
It is a Dundee shit. Yeah, buddy.
that level of style writing, right?
Right.
Like, just completely in the, and that thing has been up there now for uh I don't know, 6 to 8 months, and not a single tag
Love it.
has appeared next to it, because even the taggers have to admit, like, this guy is like such a master of the style that I would be playing myself
Yep.
Mhm.
within my own community if I even tried to deface this.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand about the culture. The culture itself was trying to improve the community through these arts programs and through these arts projects. And they didn't understand that. I mean, like
Right.
graffiti and tagging is anti-corporate,
Yep.
anti-gentrification, right?
Right.
And
Well,
it
it
does.
can be pro gentrification too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If
You kind of got to be careful, because
Yeah,
you
look
do
at the
have,
Temescal.
yeah.
well, right.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have these art brokers, and you do have people that, like, go around to like the Marriott Hotel and do corporate gigs and things like that.
True.
And they're sort of like building on the cultural cachet of the people that aren't corporate. But there are also people like Apex in San Francisco, where he's had a lot of corporate clients, but he always does his own thing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And when I interviewed him a couple years ago, he was like, "Look, if I'm going to work for Toyota, I have to let them know I'm not going to compromise any of my ideals."
Mhm. Right.
Good for them. Yeah. If you're
Yeah.
that powerful an artist, that's what you got to do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
now moving on though, because like I mean, the other thing is that we've both been very much involved in activism, particularly like Oscar Grant. We were also involved together in Occupy Oakland. We both covered those for major publications. Can you go a little bit into like how you feel that now this is we're moving away from hip hop, talking about you as a writer and as an activist now.
I mean,
Can-
I feel like Oscar Grant is hip hop.
True.
Yeah.
You
Totally.
just said everything right there, bro. But
I mean, what is not hip hop about Oscar Grant?
what I can't think of a thing. But what's not black, young, powerful in
No,
Oakland?
I mean, he represents like every. I mean, him and that whole movement and everything that happened with that sort of represents like all of the hip hop, all of the aesthetics of hip hop rolled into one.
Facts.
Like everything that hip hop actually stands for and means and why it's relevant and why it's important is embodied in that whole movement.
That's facts. That's
Yeah.
facts. That's facts. And like I mean, how about with the Occupy? How do you think that ties in?
Well, Occupy was a thing where that started on the East Coast, and I think there was a magazine that like kicked it off.
Adbusters.
And yeah, Adbusters, and it was all about protesting Wall Street and the 1%. And then it came out here to Oakland, and people said, well, we also want it to be about anti-police brutality.
Yes.
And so it pivoted at that point. It was no longer just about Wall Street and the banking crisis and the foreclosures. And then what happened is it got infiltrated by anarchists, and the anarchists were already infiltrated by agent provocateurs.
Yeah.
And I saw some paper trail that goes all, right over to what's that big brokerage firm? Um,
Merrill
you know,
Lynch.
no, they own half of the Oakland port
Oh,
terminal.
BlackRock or
No, no,
Blackstone. Oh.
no, you're close.
Which one is it, man?
They own half of the SSA terminal in Oakland at the port.
Oh my God, I'm trying to. I'm
and
blanking.
they're a big one. I can't believe it's like I can't remember it. It's on the tip of my tongue. And they also own that block where Burger King used to be on 13th.
Oh my gosh, not Farallon, but
Nope, not Farallon. They're like
I'm
a big one. I think it starts with an S.
I'm blanking. You know what? We're gonna have to put a link down at the bottom of this because we are
Yeah.
gonna find out what the name of that fucking thing is.
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
continue,
they're
continue.
they're like one of the big like Wall Street like power brokers, and they're already invested in Oakland. I didn't know how invested they were in Oakland. And yeah, they own half of the port, and they also own that block on 13th where radio used to be,
Oh
and
yeah,
Goodwill used to be, and
yeah,
Burger King used to be, and
yeah.
they shut down Goodwill and Burger King.
Yeah, that was the best Burger King ever too. That was the people's Burger King.
Well, that was where homeless people could be all day,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
nobody told them to move on.
Yeah.
But anyway, they I saw some threads linking some of these alleged agent provocateurs in Occupy Oakland all the way back to Wall Street, and it makes sense because people are but what they would do is like they would do actions like we would have excuse me, we would have like a march, like a protest. The march would be peaceful, and then some people dressed all in black with brand new backpacks. That was the
Yeah.
giveaway, the brand
Yeah.
new backpacks. They would run off and they would smash the window of a bank in broad daylight and get media coverage for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so yeah, but the Occupy thing was kind of interesting. I mean, it felt like really powerful when Boots Riley led the march to the port of Oakland,
Yep. Yep. That was
you
a
Yeah.
big
know,
deal. That was a big
and
deal.
kind of recreated the general strike of 1946.
Yeah, and also bringing up hip hop, Lupe Fiasco was a major contributor. He was doing a show at the Fox, and he bought tents and he bought food. I mean, I
Yeah,
think he contributed like $100,000, something crazy to
Really?
the
Wow.
Occupy movement. Yeah, Lupe Fiasco did that.
I mean, I remember him stopping by
Yeah,
because everything was at like Frank Ogawa
yeah,
Plaza, and so and it was crazy. Like you had like you had a tent city up there. You had people trying to do like all these like services, like free food. Eventually, that got shut down by the health department and OPD
hmm
because you can't give people that much freedom.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, the nurses, the nurses union was giving out free health care and
Yeah,
doing checkups for people. I mean, like
yeah.
it was incredible.
And what I mean is you can't give people that much freedom. It's like if people start to experience that much freedom, they start to question everything around them.
Yep.
But yeah, to me, the Occupy movement was something where initially it was like very hopeful and optimistic, and we thought we were really going to change something. And then it felt like the movement got co-opted after about a year and a half, 2 years. And by the end of it, I just wanted those people out of town.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because you had anarchists who were like on tour, who were
Right.
like, from the Midwest, and they thought that like by coming to Oakland, they're gonna, I don't know what they were thinking, but
Oh,
there was a part,
they were thinking that they knew more about organization than the home of the Black Panthers.
Yeah.
That's what they thought. They thought that they knew more about organizing than the home of the Black Panthers.
right.
That's what they thought.
And also probably trying to boost their profile too, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, they had trust funds to go back to.
Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah.
know. But I mean, I think that there were some organizations out here that had been organizing that welcomed them because of their anti-police stance.
hmm
And ultimately, I think that proved to be a strategic mistake. I also think it was a mistake when there was a proposal to change the whole name of Occupy Oakland.
Yeah, to decolonize, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And I remember Boots Riley spoke up against it because he thought the branding was stronger. And that was a huge mistake. But I think also in retrospect, that was a turning point for the
Yep.
entire movement because all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, you're not going to recognize people of color?
Right.
Yeah.
What is this even about?
Yeah.
And that was the craziest part to me is because a lot of people thought that the Occupy movement, and this is probably generally speaking true for Occupy New York, right? But here, the primary organizers were all black and brown people.
Mhm.
And at the same time, what we were getting this face of whiteness, and this face of whiteness. And so, like, you know, I think a lot of the push was why people said maybe we should call it decolonize is because it was the issues of the black and brown organizers of Occupy Oakland. It wasn't entirely the issues of the non-black and brown Occupy Wall Street guys. And
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it was to differentiate it from what was happening in New York and say we have our own thing that we've been organizing since 1966 or
That's
whatever.
right.
And you know, y'all can't just come in here and basically be like Mick Movement.
Yeah.
You know, you
Yeah.
can't just Mick Movement us. You know, it's like New Times coming into the Bay Area and putting their cookie cutter template. That might work in Cincinnati.
Yeah, exactly. Because the thing is, like, look, you can't turn Oakland into Denver. And
No, you can't.
You can't do that.
You can't. You know, Oakland is actually higher than Denver, just not in altitude.
Yeah, true enough, brother. True enough. Okay, so let's move on to the current things that are going on. Like,
yeah, are you wearing a respectability sweater, dude?
Oh no, this dude was killing me with this shit. Oh my, me and Eric were on the phone. I was talking to him about having him on, and we started talking about Lauren Taylor sweaters.
We did. I like his sweaters more than his policies. His sweater game is untouchable. Fire.
He's on Huxtable level sweaters, man.
They're next level Huxtable.
That's right. So he's got so many liens. He keeps spending all his profits on sweaters from his real estate.
Respectability sweater, though. I mean, my God, what a term. Okay, but so how are you feeling right now about the current thing that we're dealing with Lauren Taylor, with Barbara Lee, with like, you know, like I say, I mean, like we were talking, Eric, like, you know, I've known you for a long time. Yeah, and you're one of the last men standing. So you've had to stand on the crux of, like I said, like politics, art, journalism. You've had to stand there, you know. So your perspective is really unique because you are one of the last men standing, right? Yeah. And so, like, I mean, how are you feeling about what's going on with Taylor, with Lee, with the elections?
Well, what I don't really like is the influence of outside money coming from tech billionaires, hedge fund managers, and they're linking up with like police unions. Yep. And then they're creating all these astroturf organizations that are then funding these candidates.
Yeah.
So, you know, how is that not a special interest? You know, it is a special interest. So I don't really like the, you know, outside people trying to jury rig local elections. I think that's really whack.
Yeah.
But you know, in terms of, I mean, we already went through the recall. We can't take that back. We went through 2 recalls. I mean, you know, Sheng Tao, whatever you can say about her, she's still entitled to the presumption of innocence. The FBI has not, or the DOJ has not presented a case.
Yep.
Yes.
You know, we don't know what's actually going to stick. We know that, like, one of the people that was up to it, you know, up to his head, turned state's witness.
Yeah, that's Juarez. Talking about Juarez, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's a unnamed co-conspirator, but I mean, he apparently is the only person that can actually corroborate any of this, and he's a snitch.
Yeah.
So how credible is that? So, but I don't want to rush to judgment on Sheng Tao, although it looks very, very bad for her. But she hasn't been convicted yet of anything. You wouldn't know that if you follow Seneca Scott on X.
Yeah.
Because he's already saying 95 years, 95. Wait a minute. You don't believe in a legal judicial proceeding?
Of course not.
You know? And so, like, people like that, I mean, these are scavengers that come to pick at the flesh of, you know, our community.
That's right.
I feel like we are lucky to have someone like Barbara Lee run, who has as much, you know, ethical integrity as probably any politician ever in the United States.
Yep.
Facts. She's the only one that stood up against the Iraq War. I mean, she's got my undying gratitude.
Yeah, she's still a politician, and she still had to be in Congress for 27 years with no scandals. So she knew how to, you know, she had to learn how to play the game. but she did so without really compromising her integrity. And so I think, like, from a policy standpoint, she's going to be the best mayor that Oakland could have at this point in time. And when I talk about policies, there's three major issues, right? There's public safety, there's homelessness or the unhoused, and there's the budget deficit.
Yeah.
These issues are all intertwined. And you need someone that, you need someone with an outside perspective that can look at Oakland government and say, you know what your problem is? You're not an efficient bureaucracy.
Oh, no.
You're completely fucking up with your homeless strategy.
Nope.
We've got these two audits from 2022 and 2024 that tell you exactly how you're fucking up. You need to build more housing. You only have, you have 5,600 homeless and only 1,300 shelter beds. Do the math.
Yep.
So, and then on the other hand, you have Lauren Taylor talking about let's sweep the encampments now.
Yeah.
Because that's what the people, the big tech money behind him, wants him to say.
Yep.
And, so I really doubt that, like, Lauren Taylor, I don't know if he has any compassion inside of that sweater. I don't.
There's no respectability.
Yeah.
It's a respectability sweater, but it's not a compassionate sweater. So, and I mean, I looked at his policy on public safety. This guy is talking about adding 100 police officers immediately. You can't even do that when you're in a budget deficit. That would add $50 million to the deficit. And in actuality, where we have to find a more efficient way of government spending is in things like the police department. I mean, OPD was $53 million over budget on their overtime. That's money that could have gone to social services programs, building housing, drug abuse, counseling, mental health treatment for the unhoused, job creation, more lighting downtown. We don't just have like an extra 53 million to give away, and now you want to add another 50 million to that.
Ain't gonna happen.
That it's not practical, but he's saying that because that's what he thinks people want to hear.
Yeah.
And when I hear Barbara Lee, she's not saying anything that's impractical.
Yep. Right.
Yeah. And I was gonna say too, another point that I believe Omar Yassin, Hype Republic, Oakland Observer reporter, he was pointing out too that they have academies every year and barely anyone shows up. They'll maybe get like 10 graduates, 16 graduates. There's no way they're gonna get another 100 officers for Oakland. But the whole thing though too is that the quote unquote short staff allows them to build up all that overtime, because they could be like, oh well, no one's on the job, I gotta keep working.
and in fact, like the studies I've seen show that the police have hurt their brand by such an incredible degree, going from George Floyd to Eric Garner to
and Oakland's the writers.
And the writers, and measurably, like nobody wants to be affiliated with that anymore.
Well,
and so it's going to be hard to find. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's also that other departments pay more and their jobs are less stressful than Oakland, but OPD brought it on themselves. But yeah, it's like, where are you going to find all those officers? Are you just going to manufacture them like you're Moff Gideon? It's like you can't, and it's just not practical at all. And the thing is, like, you got to curb that spending first. You have $53 million in excess spending that we know about.
Right.
And you got to find more efficient ways to police. And when I hear Barbara Lee talking about public safety, she kind of knows what she's talking about, because she's like, well, what I would do is I would create a program with Merritt College that's like a training program before you get to the academy. So sort of prepping people to then be able to take the next step.
Wow. Well, see, that's a great idea, because the thing is that we have a bunch of rent-a-cops right now. We could like so many security guards. And if you have a clean record, Like, you don't have to be standing out in front of that bank. You could actually go and take that uniform and wear an actual one. That's a really good idea. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, like, what do you get with a guard card? You get like maybe $30 an hour. I mean, with police, like you're making over six figures. But so yeah, I think that I think that Barbara Lee actually has studied the landscape as far as policy issues. I think she knows what she's talking about. She doesn't say everything that she knows in every single soundbite.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of like homelessness, she's not talking about sweeping the camps. That's already in the encampment management policy. She's talking about we need to build more housing. We need to accelerate the pathways to housing by cutting bureaucratic red tape. I just looked it up. The permitting process can add like, 2 to 3 years, which adds onto the cost of every unit that you build. Are your affordable housing units costing $600,000 or $800,000, or are you getting them, for like $400,000 per unit? You can keep your costs low if you streamline the permitting process, and also you can create like designated housing. You can use city land that they already own, and you can also use acquisition. So there's all these things that previous administrations have not done that Barbara Lee, at least, is saying that she's open to doing.
Yeah, and that's that openness that I think is important. Okay, well, Eric, it's been an hour, man. It's gone by so fast.
Dude, we got to do this again. I have so many questions. My God.
Like Eric Arnold and OK Player, like some of the things he's done with those guys has been monumental as well. He's like one of my best friends. He's my brother, but also like I said, he literally is like an Oakland cultural worker, an icon. And it's been a pleasure sitting down and talking with you as always, brother.
Okay, but Digable Planets is not gangster rap. They're movement rap.
No,
they're liberation rap. They are not gangster.
They're gangster.
They're not.
Are we talking blowout? They're
not gangster.
We're talking blowout comb. I have an argument. I don't have the time to go into the argument right now with you jokers.
I mean, but I have an argument. That's like cultural militant. It's not gangster.
It's gangster. This is so gangster. Now I'm making bacon. Oh my God! I'm making bacon.
Is there one song? Yeah. Okay. Well, again, that's liberation politics.
Oh. Sorry, you had to see that, Kevin. This is a
to me. This
is a 20-year argument.
To me, gangster is when you don't have that revolutionary framework, but you're still out there on the streets. But you don't have.
Are you going to say the Cube doesn't have a revolutionary framework?
No, he does, because he worked with the Bomb Squad.
What I'm saying, so Cube is a gangster, and he's got a revolutionary framework.
Well, yeah, on exactly 2 of his albums over a 35-year career. But,
okay.
Other than Death Certificate and America's Most Wanted, it's debatable. Okay. But those 2, yeah, they're both revolutionary and gangster.
So I'm saying that Digable Planets falls in that category.
No, because they're not gangster.
I see. That's the reason why we have to stop talking about this. This argument has lasted for 20 plus years.
Gangsters don't wear light blue suede Pumas.
What?
They do look like the cashmere sweaters do kind of like pull it off.
But I mean, I love Blowout Comb. I think it's an amazing album. I mean, so Dial 7, that one is that's like the best song.
Dog, it is sick, man. You talking creamy spies? Oh God, the whole damn thing is beautiful.
The man's game ain't shit. Ghetto level. But see, they're ghetto level. They never said they were gangster.
Ghetto level. Don't wait until we get to the end of the podcast to start this.
I'm just saying, if you look at their own quotes, if you look at their own comments, their own
you're not gonna win this. You're not gonna win this.
I already did. It's over.
Oh my God.
It's over. Just mail me the check.
Okay.
Mail me the check. Come on.
Okay. We're done here.
Check us out on all the socials.
Check us out on all the socials.
Look. I don't want you to feel all that special because I had like a hip hop producer like from San Francisco try to convince me that the Beastie Boys were gangsta.
But they.
Because he said, well, when Paul Revere came out, all these street dudes were listening to it. That's because there were only 5 hip hop records.
Yeah.
Okay, but on Jesus, on the Def Jam, early Def Jam albums, I'm talking Run DMC, not when they were on Profile.
Run DMC was on Profile. They never had an album.
I just said that, dude. I just said Profile.
Yeah, they were never on Def Jam.
But I'm putting them in a category of like the early like Def Jam, Russell Simmons kind of connection thing. You had the Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, Run DMC, the only people who were really talking about consuming drugs and alcohol, and the only people that were talking about carrying weapons and killing people were the Beastie Boys.
But they were joking. Paul Revere is a satire.
Be sure to check out our Patreon. Check out our Patreon. Be sure to
rap did not exist as a genre back then.
Cool G rap. I can't believe you're doing this with me right now. We have to end this.
I mean, that's that pre-Ice-T.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay, Cool G rap is gangster, but he only had one revolutionary song.
What about
KRS-One?
No, Jesus Christ. Now you got me all discombobulated. He actually says it was self-destruction. Just Ice. Just Ice.
Yeah.
Just Ice was a gangster.
Well, he was like the original hip-hop gangster, right?
Thank you. Which was like in 1986, 87. So
I mean,
right around the same time as right around the same time. Yeah, right around the same time
with Mantronic production. Like,
yes,
put that record on.
I am not going to sit here and finish my podcast arguing with you about the minutiae of hip hop categorization.
I mean, but Just Ice was actually a 5%er.
That too. So, he was both. You could be both.
He was like in a post-gangster phase. He wasn't talking about any current gangster
activities. I'm going to try this again,
rapping.
Eric Arnold. I'm going to try this again, Eric Arnold.
You can't compare him to like a UGK.
Be sure to check out our Patreon and be sure to check out Eric Arnold and look him up. He's always involved in something. And we are going to thank him for being here with us today on the Doomloop Dispatch. And as always, Kevin,
keep fighting the good fight.